I want to start off by thanking Nuffield for giving me the opportunity to be here and to travel. And a big thank you to McDonald's UK and Ireland, because not only have they given me the money and sponsorship to do these travels, they also they've supported me in how I use my findings in creating a bigger impact into the sector. And I'll talk a bit more about some of the other projects I've been working with McDonald's since. The first thing I want to start off with is the title. So, encouraging and supporting. So we've all heard of diversity inclusion, or some of us have. And diversity means difference. So bringing in difference is one thing, and that's about the encouraging diversity. But the next thing is supporting. And if we bring in difference, they're going to leave. And so actually, we have to do both. We have to both encourage diversity, and we have to support diversity to thrive in our sector. So the objectives of my study was to start off with history, because we can't learn about creating change and encouraging new difference if we don't understand the background of why that difference isn't there, the background of why there isn't any diversity. Then I wanted to talk to people and understand the barriers of BPOC people joining the sector, and then learn about the experiences of them when they're in the sector, and to see, well, how do they stay, why do they stay, or why do they leave? The final thing was looking at positive examples. You know, it's good to see, hear those are the theory, but what are there any positive actions that we can learn from? So my professional journey, I've always loved farm animals. I always wanted to be a vet, and like it was said earlier, you grow up with storybooks, and so you have that imagination. And being a vet, I didn't have any role models. I didn't really have any pets. So again, I had to break that barrier to get into vet school. And as at vet school, I got that passion for farm animals, and it was working in Dumfries and Galloway. I had a vet who took me under his wing, and he really encouraged me to get into dairy production. So, that was my passion. And then when I came out, actually, I've got to be thankful to Wales, because this is where I got my first job. I applied for so many places, and Wales gave me my first opportunity. So I was here working on one of the busiest sheep practices in the country, and then my career went on. But one thing throughout my career, throughout my childhood, I was the only one like me. I didn't see anyone like me, hear anyone like me, talk to anyone like me. And so, again, being in a space where you're the only one is really, really difficult. And it gets more difficult when you face problems. Who do you go to? Where do you seek help? And it was through that I thought, through a certain incident, I'd been working and I'd been going through life. And then when the impacts of negativity or prejudices started to affect me, then I thought, what do I do about it? So that's when I created the British Veterinary Ethnicity and Diversity Society. What I thought was, why don't we get more people like me together so that we have that supportive network, but then we can drive education, drive change, and drive other things. So I started that, but then I thought, well, how do we impact change into the sector? And so I tried to get involved with some more organisations. So again, when I went to the OFC, I felt like this was an organisation that I could be part of and that I could create that change and show change. St Werburgh's inner city farm, it's the second oldest inner city farm in the UK. It's in a marginalised area. And again, how can we get people to understand their food? The Country Trust, they work with children from marginalised backgrounds, low-income backgrounds. So again, bringing those children onto farms and giving them experience. And it's the children that are left behind. It's easy for children that can afford it, that have those contacts. But what are those children in inner city areas, coastal areas, that don't have that opportunity? And the Land Workers Alliance, again, I can talk a bit about them and Nuffield for this opportunity today. So some stats. Only 1% of people in agriculture are people of colour. 1%. That's the least diverse sector, next to the environmental sector and the animal science sector. So we're in the least diverse sector when it comes to people of colour. Veterinary medicine isn't much better. We're 4%. So we're the least diverse profession when it comes to people of colour in this country. So being a farm vet, I'm one of probably 5 or 6 people in this whole country as a person of colour. And that's tiny, But if we think of outside these walls, we live in a country where 14% are people of colour and growing. That's bigger than the population of Wales and Scotland put together. Now, if I look at this room, how many people of colour are there? Yet, how many people from Scotland, how many people from Wales are here? So why isn't that representation there? But children is even more stark. 25% of children in secondary school are people of colour, children of colour. And if you look at Birmingham, for example, 80% of children in Birmingham are children of colour. You look at primary age school children, that's even bigger, 33%. 1 in 3 children in primary school right now are children of colour. Now, not only are those children the future talent, the future inspiration, the future of our sector, but the 14% and the children are our consumers. How do we know how to serve that community, embrace that community, if we don't have them within our sector? Yep. If you think about the biggest companies, Amazon, Coca-Cola, Nike, why are they so successful as a company? Because they embrace that diversity at higher levels, so that therefore they can think strategically about moving forward and serving their customers better. So the first thing is understanding and learning, and understanding what language is, and understanding different terminology. So again, just look at those words and think to yourself, do you really understand what they mean? Do you know what race is? Do you know what about the empire? I didn't know. I'm not going to blame you if you don't know, because I didn't know. I had to learn on this journey. But again, it's about those things. It's about what do we know, what don't we know, and where do we learn about it? So my Nuffield journey started in the UK, and because of my contacts and because of the organisations I worked with, I already had an understanding of where we are in the UK. And then originally I wanted to go to the US, Canada, and US, Australia, and New Zealand, but because of COVID, I couldn't get into New Zealand or Australia, so I decided to focus on the US. So my first stop was Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, and Georgia. And the reason is, as a percentage of farmers, they've got the highest percentage of minority farmers in the US. So the average is 1% of BPOC farmers. In those states, it's 6%. So I thought, what I want to do is go to those areas and see why there are so many farmers like that and what their experiences are. And then I thought, well, I need to go back to the US, what can I do? And I thought, Texas. Texas, as a state, has the highest number of farmers in the whole of the US, but also has the highest number of BPOC farmers. So some states have the highest percentage, and one state has the highest number. So I thought, that's where I'm going to learn. And the line doesn't end because, again, I haven't finished my journey. I think this is only the start, and talking to different people and understanding that it's given me more to do. So I'm breaking it down to how do we go about this. This is about being practical. We need a vision. And the vision is we need to change. We need to be different, okay? If we look at the room today, can we diversify this room in 5 years, 10 years' time? And if we have that aim, then we can go about doing it. If we don't even think it's important, then, it's a non-starter. So about having that vision. The next thing is about understanding division. Why aren't people here? Who's in the room and who's not in the room? Now, division, and in the South, these were the sort of things that were in the museums, and these are the sort of things they talked about. It's stark. It was enforced. And we think, well, we never had that in this country, but we did. We had that. The Bristol bus drivers, they didn't hire black drivers, and it caused that outrage. We had those signs, blue, black, no Irish, no dogs. All those things happened in this country. So it's not as though it's something in another country and we're fine. And just because it's not as stark as that, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. We still have biases. We still have prejudice. And that's what holds back so much diversity. So we've got to understand the difference between intentional and unintentional biases and prejudice. And once we understand that, then we can think about how to break down those divisions. Education. And again, it's been mentioned before. So again, I had to educate myself, and I'd say, it's a part of personal journey. It's part of changing. So again, people who talk about regenerative agriculture, sustainable agriculture, how many times do we talk about George Washington Carver? In the earliest 20th century, he was one of the most fundamental, African-American scientists in this field. He talked about crop rotation, soil health. He was an innovator in peanuts, and peanut butter and all these products are all down to him. So again, learning about history, learning about the role models of who changed that history. I went to learn about the Army in the US, about the Marines, about the Buffalo Soldiers, who were fundamental in part of the American campaign during the Second World War, but aren't celebrated when we talk about the victories in the Second World War. And this university, Tuskegee University in Alabama, is special. 80% of all black veterinarians in the US come from that one university. Why do all those black vets or students go to that one university? Why don't they go to the other universities in the country? What is special about that university? And then we come to inclusivity. Do they do something to make those students feel like they're welcome and keep them there? And then we think about how do we create that change. So as part of my Nuffield journey, I started off in this house. And this house is quite special. This house is where Martin Luther King was born. And I followed him, and I followed his journey, because again, we have these ideas and we can see the problems, but how do we change it? And I followed the social justice movement through Alabama, Louisiana, and you know, this is where his grave is. This is where he's buried. He's not buried far from his house. He was born in Atlanta, in Georgia, and he's buried in Atlanta, Georgia. But you know, there's a church, and that church there was one of the churches he was a pastor at. And that church is based in Montgomery, Alabama, which was the capital of the Confederates. And again, he tried to enact change. And in Montgomery, you can see that little leaf, and that leaf was where Rosa Parks took the bus where she was told to get to the back of the bus, and she didn't. And therefore, she caused a bus boycott, which led to huge social change. But that social change wouldn't have happened just with those individuals. It also took allies to support them with that. So it wasn't just black people supporting them, there were white people there to support them as well, because they knew that it was important that everyone had equity and equality. Creating connections. So again, you know, get out of your comfort zone and mix with people. You know, use social media more. And that's what I found. Everyone had a different story and a different experience to share with me. And I found that you know, the most important thing, really, when we're trying to learn about difference. So the process for change is accept we have a problem, educate ourselves, and then start to engage and work towards diversity. And then constantly assess and then reassess on how we create that change. And again, take responsibility, individual as well as organizational responsibility. So quickly, I'm running out of time now, so I'm going to quickly go through some proactive action in the US. So again, in this here is a classroom. They taught agriculture in that classroom, yet they put pictures that reflected the children. So the children were learning agriculture, yet could look at the walls and see something that they could connect with. And 80% of those children then went on to study agriculture, black and brown children. And again, in conferences and such like, it's about changing who's talking. It's about changing the subject matter. The UK, we have positive action as well. So again, scholarships for people of colour to study veterinary medicine or agriculture, people to speak up. The Land Workers Alliance, creating BPOP groups to go to farms and creating those safe spaces. And again, we work to create the first diversity conference in the veterinary profession, and that can happen in agriculture quite easily. And the UK, as part of the Oxford Farming Conference, you know, how do we create change and how do we create that inclusivity? So it's not just about bringing diversity in, but it's about creating that inclusivity. So we launched the Breaking Barriers Scholarship, and again, McDonald's were very keen to support this because they could see the value and how we could do this to create positive change. So on Tuesday, I just came back from a field trip with the new scholars, all studying agriculture, all part of our sector, and all keen to be to stay within our sector. So again, we need to include them, and that includes the materials to include them as well. So I want to conclude that BPOP people do want to be part of agriculture. The whole notion that people want to just do medicine or law or anything like that, that's rubbish. You can, if you encourage children at a young age and then reflect on that and add on to that and give them the most positive experience, they will stay and they will want to do it. Because agriculture is a huge diversity of different topics. So again, we can get a whole diversity of people. All members of society should be part of our sector. Again, how do we bring that rural and urban divide together? It's by having people in each other's places, you know, urban people in the rural sector and the rural people going out to the urban sectors. Barriers are historic. People say racism doesn't exist. No, because the stats prove that it doesn't. There is difference. There are barriers. We need to just accept it and then break them down. And finally, it takes individuals, leaders, organizations to actually allocate time, money, and space to do this. Don't expect people to do this in their spare time or, you know, and have to do their full-time job. Actually give people those resources to make a difference. You shouldn't put all this labor on somebody's shoulders because, again, you will break them. And again, those people, those innovators like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King, they made huge sacrifices in their lives to do what they did. And it shouldn't mean that we need to do that now. So I want to thank my family, my 3 children, my wife, because, again, it is quite difficult mentally and physically to talk about and to try and learn about and to show people about. But I think, you know, my wife, my children are with me on this journey. I want to thank Nuffield for giving me the opportunity, McDonald's, who have taken this on as a part of a bigger project, and I think I really am pleased about that. And the other organisations are also involved, like the OFC and such like, who are also part of the journey. I was in New Orleans, and I went to an art gallery, a black art gallery, and I saw this sign, and I think this summed up exactly what I want as a vision for our sector. And I think that hopefully that's something that some of us, or all of us, could hopefully believe in to make positive change. Thank you.